Booker Taliaferro Washington was born a slave in Franklin County, Virginia, on April 5, 1856. He lived on a 207-acre plantation owned by James and Elizabeth Burroughs, and spent his childhood living in a simple log cabin. His mother married a slave named Washington Ferguson, where Booker inherited his last name. The family moved to Malden, West Virginia after the war, and he worked on the salt mines at the age of 9 and found a job as a salt packer. He worked in the coal mines from 1866 to 1868 and worked as a houseboy for a wife of Lewis Ruffner, the owner of the mines. Even as a child, Washington felt the worst part of slavery was that it was suppressing the child's natural desire to learn. When Booker was working on the mines, he overheard people talking about a school for Negroes and made it his absolute goal to attend. Washington entered the Hampton Agricultural Institute in 1872 when he was just 16 years old. Principal Samuel Armstrong believed that it was important for freed slaves to get educated. Impressed with Washington, he arranged for his tuition to be paid for. Armstrong believed Washington's mentor was the best part about him. Washington graduated from the school in 1875 and returned to Malden, where he found work at local schools. In 1880, Lewis Adams, a black politician in Macon County, agreed to help two white Democratic Party candidates, William Foster and Arthur Brooks, win a local election in return for building a Negro school in the area. They both won. Samuel Armstrong was asked to recommend a white teacher to take charge of this school. Instead, he suggested Washington. The Tuskegee Negro Normal Institute opened July 4, 1888. It only received funding for $2,000 a year. Washington was able to borrow the money from the treasurer of the Hampton Agricultural Institute to purchase a plantation on the outskirts of the Tuskegee and build his own land. The school taught academic subjects such as math and science, but had an agricultural emphasis, such as building things with your hands. In 1888, the school owned 500 acres of land and had over 400 students. Washington's conservative leadership of the school made it acceptable to white control. He believed blacks needed to prove their loyalty to the United States by working first and then gaining their political rights later. In 1895, Washington made himself become a national figure when giving a speech at the opening of the Cotton States in the International Exposition in Atlanta. He was widely reported by newspapers. The Atlanta Compromise speech went down in history. His conservative views made him very popular with whites, such as President William McKinley. He visited the school and often praised Washington. In 1900, Washington helped establish the NNBL, the National Negro Business League. Washington was the president. Its main goal was to help promote the commercial and financial development of the Negro. To Washington, the opportunity to earn a living plus property was more important than the right to vote. He was often criticized that his views were too similar to those of white Americans. In 1901, Theodore Roosevelt invited Washington to the White House because he admired his ideas so greatly. In 1903, William Du Bois attacked Washington with an essay on the work of the soul of the black folks. Washington retaliated by criticizing Du Bois's Niagara Movement, which was a black civil rights organization. The Niagara Movement was a call for the opposition to racial segregation and disenfranchisement. Washington felt it was too intense and radical. The two clashed over the establishment of the NAACP, the National American Association of Colored People, which was established in 1909. Theodore Roosevelt and William Henry Taft also invited him to the White House, where he could have a say on African American appointments because they felt he was such a great activist. Washington suffered from artericulosis and died in Tuskegee on November 14, 1915. Over 8,000 people attended his funeral held in the Tuskegee Institute Chapel. Even those who disagreed with Washington could not deny that his greatness of a man or the fact that his death was a loss to his race and his country. Despite Washington's criticisms of his methods for gradual fight for civil rights, he stands out as one of the great personalities in the United States history, and he did what he could and what he thought was possible for his race given the place and time in which he lived.